All right, diving in. This time we're looking at something you sent in a bunch of writings all about strong culture. Apparently, it's a big deal in Chinese business. What got you interested in this?
Well, it's definitely not something you hear much about in like Western business, you know? It kind of turns a lot of the usual ideas about success on their head.
Yeah, I noticed right away these sources don't mess around. It's all about aligning yourself with the objective laws of the world. Sounds kind of like ancient philosophy to me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it's not so much about specific laws, more like recognizing how power really works in the world, like natural selection, but for business, survival of the fittest.
So, not really about playing fair, more about figuring out the rules, even if they're kind of brutal.
Exactly. And that's where they bring up this wolf and sheep thing. Strong culture is all about being the wolf. You got to be adaptable, use what you've got, and always be aware of like who has the power.
Yeah, some of the language in here is pretty intense. One line that really stuck with me. You are a sheep, you should be eaten by the wolf. This is the natural order of things. Like, are they saying people should just accept being preyed on?
I don't think it's about passively accepting anything, more like realizing that some people out there do operate with that wolf mentality. And if you're not ready to deal with that, you might get left behind.
Okay, so it's a call to like develop your own strength and awareness. But what about things like ethics and compassion? Seems like strong culture, people don't really care about that stuff.
That's a really important point. And to be fair to these writings, I don't think it's about ditching morality completely. It's more like recognizing that the usual ideas about morality might not be the best strategy, when others aren't playing by those same rules.
So picking your battles, figuring out when to adapt.
Exactly. In fact, these texts even suggest that someone with a real strong culture mindset can actually use their understanding of power to make positive change. We could dig into that more later. But for now, it's about seeing how this kind of practical awareness can actually be an advantage.
It's definitely making me rethink how I approach things, that's for sure. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, they say that where you come from, like your cultural background, has a big impact on your potential for success. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, they're saying the values and beliefs you pick up from your culture, even your tastes, shape how you see the world. They use this interesting example about food.
Oh, yeah. They talk about how people from Sichuan province in China, they love spicy food, right?
Yeah.
Well, people from Guangdong prefer milder flavors. Seems like a simple example, but what's the deeper point there?
It's that those seemingly small preferences actually show a deeper cultural influence on how people see the world and make decisions. They argue that cultures that value being adaptable, pragmatic, and focused on results are more likely to produce successful people, especially in competitive environments.
So are they saying some cultures are just inherently stronger than others?
It's a tricky question,
Yeah.
and it's important to remember these texts are just one perspective.
Mm.
What they're really highlighting is how deeply culture shapes us, from what food we like all the way to, say, how we approach a business deal.
That's fascinating. Makes you wonder how much of what we think of as individuality is really just, our culture. So if someone wants to develop this strong culture mindset, what do they do? The texts lay out three specific steps, right?
Yeah. First, you got to believe in strong individuals, people who embody those strong culture traits. Then you got to follow them, watch what they do, learn their strategies, and finally, align yourself with them. Build relationships, get mentored, and try to really absorb their way of thinking.
Interesting, because that goes against a lot of the advice you hear about being humble and seeking equality. This is about actively looking up to people who are already ahead.
Totally. It's acknowledging that learning from the best can be the fastest way to succeed.
Like an apprenticeship for, well, power. But it takes being willing to let go of some pretty deep seated beliefs, too. Now, the second source you found connects this strong culture idea to a specific example the character Ding Yuanying from a Chinese TV series called Tay.
Exactly. Ding Yuanying is like strong culture in action. He's super smart, strategic, and he gets how systems work.
Mhm.
Economics, social stuff, even psychology, he sees it all.
And he's not afraid to use that knowledge to get what he wants. He definitely makes you question that whole playing fair thing.
He does, which brings up a big question. How do we balance this emphasis on strength and practicality with ethics? Can you really be successful in the long run if you're always operating these moral gray areas?
That's where I start to get uncomfortable. This whole wolf thing can be pretty unnerving.
Yeah, it raises some ethical red flags for sure. But the texts do say that you need a balance between strength and what they call weak cultural attributes to keep society working.
So it's not just about being a ruthless individual. They recognize that society needs some kind of moral framework.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. Strong culture pushes for individual strength and self-reliance, but it also stresses building a sustainable society. It's a weird paradox that we'll get into more in the next part of our deep dive.
So strong culture is saying you need to be strong on your own, but also build a strong society. Seems a little backwards. How does that even work?
It's a tricky balance, that's for sure. But maybe it's not as contradictory as it sounds. Remember those 3 steps to getting that strong culture mindset. Believe in the strong, follow them, align with them. Let's dig into those a bit.
Yeah, let's break it down. What does it actually mean to believe in those strong individuals?
It's about seeing that there are people out there who've achieved stuff you admire, you know. Instead of being jealous or resentful, you actually try to learn from them.
So you see them as mentors, not competition.
Exactly. The texts talk about seeking out high-level individuals, people who have that strong culture mindset and have actually gotten results.
Okay, but how do you even know who these high-level people are? What makes them different?
That's where the following part comes in. You watch what they do, figure out their strategies, and try to understand how they think.
So it's not just copying what they do, it's getting into their heads.
Right. And the texts warn against just blindly doing what someone else did. You got to develop your own understanding of strong culture and apply it to your own situation.
Makes sense. You can't just be a clone and expect the same success. You got to adapt it to your own strengths and weaknesses. So how do you go from just following to actually aligning yourself with these people? Is this where that whole Guangxi thing comes in?
You're spot on. The texts don't come right out and say Guanxi, but yeah, building those relationships is key. It's about making connections with these high-level people, trying to get mentored, learning from their experience.
So even though it's about being a strong individual, strong culture still recognizes the importance of social networks.
Exactly. It's not about being a lone wolf. It's realizing that the right relationships can help you get where you want to go.
This all sounds like a lot of effort. Is there a shortcut to getting this strong culture mindset?
The texts do have some practical tips.
Mhm.
Reading stuff written by successful people, listening to podcasts like this one, and just exposing yourself to different viewpoints.
So basically actively challenging your own beliefs.
Absolutely. They're big on critical thinking. Don't just take things at face value. Question everything, look for evidence, and form your own conclusions.
That reminds me of what they said about seeing the truth. It's like realizing the world doesn't always work the way we think it should, with fairness and all that.
Exactly. Strong culture is all about seeing the world as it is, not how you wish it was, which can actually help you navigate things better.
But doesn't all this focus on being practical and strong lead to a pretty cynical view of the world? Where's the room for, like, idealism or compassion?
That's a fair point.
Mhm.
And honestly, some of it does come off kind of harsh. But remember, these texts are coming from a specific point of view, one that's focused on achieving success in a competitive world.
So maybe it's not the whole picture, more like a tool that's useful in certain situations?
Exactly. Like having a toolbox. Right. You wouldn't use a hammer for everything.
Hmm.
Same goes for strong culture. It's valuable in some contexts, but not a magic solution for every problem.
Makes sense, right? Tool for the job. So we've talked about how to develop this strong culture mindset, but what about the bigger picture? How does this philosophy play out in society as a whole? We've been talking about this strong culture idea as a way to succeed personally, but it sounds like there's a bigger picture too. Like, how does it actually address society as a whole,
Yeah.
especially for folks who maybe aren't cut out to be wolves?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? Strong culture doesn't pretend everyone's going to be equally successful. Some people will thrive, others, well, not so much. It's kind of like nature, right?
Okay, but I'm sensing some tension here. On one hand, it's all about individual ambition, but you're also saying it acknowledges a responsibility to the community.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not just every wolf for themselves. These writings actually suggest that truly strong people get that their success depends on a healthy society. It benefits everyone, even the top wolves, so to speak.
So, how does that actually work? Like, what would a strong person do to help those who are maybe less strong?
Could be a lot of things. Creating opportunities, supporting those safety nets, even just treating everyone with respect, no matter where they are in the pecking order.
So, almost like enlightened self interest, realizing that a stable society helps everyone in the long run, even the strong.
Exactly. You can't really thrive if everything around you is falling apart. Your success is linked to the whole system. Now, the texts don't give specific rules for how to balance all this, but they definitely give you a new way to think about ambition and society.
This has been really eye opening. We started with strong culture sounding kind of ruthless, and now we're seeing how it can include social responsibility too. Not as simple as I thought.
And that's what makes these texts so interesting. They get you thinking about success, power, and your place in the world in a whole new way. It's not about blindly following everything strong culture says. It's about taking the ideas that resonate with you and using them wisely.
So, for our listener who's been with us on this deep dive, what's the main takeaway?
I think it's this. Strong culture has some useful tools for navigating life, but it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It's about building your own strengths, understanding how power works, and considering the impact of your actions on everyone else.
Finding that balance between what you want and what's good for society. Not easy, but definitely something worth thinking about.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this has been a really thought provoking look at strong culture. Thanks for joining us, and big thanks to you for sending this in. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.